Morning. It's morning in Honolulu. I'm Susan Arnett. I'm a criminal defense lawyer. I just retired from the Public Defender's Office. I also teach at the University of Hawaii Law School, and I am looking forward to your presentation.
Hi, I'm Andy Levy. I'm a trial lawyer from Baltimore, Maryland. I also teach at Maryland's two law schools, the University of Maryland and the University of Baltimore. And just to give you an idea how early Susan started this morning, it is not only morning where she is, it is mid-morning where she is.
Yes, and sorry, hi. My name is Anthony Miller. I'm really excited to be here with you guys today. I am an alumni of the program, so I competed myself in my senior year of high school, and I have been working as a coordinator ever since for the last 10 years in the state of Nevada. I've helped organize the competition and coach students and teachers in preparing for competition. And this is my first year judging at the national level, so I'm really excited to be here and hear everything you've got to show us today. Thanks for your time.
So before I read the question, would you introduce yourselves and your teacher?
Of course. Good afternoon, judges, or good morning for some of you. My name is Mark Salazar. We're also all outgoing seniors representing Unit 4.
Hello, my name is Carlos Zamora.
My name is Joel Bolufe, and we're happy to be here today.
And may we just ask where in Florida you are from?
Miami, Florida.
Thank you. And your teacher?
We're joined today by Mr. Juan Del Rio and Miss Martha Salazar. There they are.
Congratulations, teachers.
Great, yeah.
All right, I will read question 2, with which I know you are already intimately familiar. Members of Congress are not only legislators, but they are also inquisitorial and should meet frequently to inspect the conduct of the public officers. So said George Mason at the Philadelphia Convention. How effectively do you believe Congress has used its investigatory power? Explain the differences, if any, between Congress's power to investigate and the power of oversight. Which power, in your opinion, is more significant? How effectively do you believe Congress has used its oversight power? Please begin.
A legislative body cannot legislate wisely nor effectively in the absence of the information respecting the conditions which the legislation is intended to affect or change. Justice Van Devanter. The Supreme Court determined that the framers intended for Congress to seek out information when crafting and reviewing legislation. This is because the U.S. Constitution doesn't explicitly grant Congress the investigatory power. Article 1, Section 1, however, provides all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States. Congress has shown the effectiveness of its investigatory power throughout the investigations of the Teapot Dome scandal in the 1920s, as well as the Watergate scandal in the 1970s. For many years, the investigatory power of Congress was limited to investigations of the executive department, where they proved to be effective in uncovering presidential abuses of power, as well as corruption. I believe the legislative branch fulfills George Mason's belief of the true nature of legislators, not just as lawmakers, but as possessors of inquisitorial power.
The congressional investigative power was intended for purposes to seek pertinent information regarding the creation and reviews of bills and legislation. Policies are drafted when an issue calls for government's attention and must be remedied. The difference is highlighted within the oversight power. It is intended for Congress to supervise and monitor the implementations of laws they pass. Congress has passed a wide range of authority in the execution and policy creation relating to federal laws to executive agencies. Due to the release of integral policymaking powers to bureaucrats not directly elected by the people, the Supreme Court has described Congress's power to oversee the other branch as inherent to the legislative process. The power of oversight is inherently more significant due to the fact that it also involves the power to investigate. Within its oversight of other federal agencies or aspects of government, Congress may find itself with vital information that may lead to the creation of new laws. The most important aspect of the oversight power is seen through the impeachment proceedings of government officials. Congress's ability to hold the power to check another branch of the federal government holds heavy weight in its ability to remove individuals from public office. The mere ability to oversee the actions of persons violating the Constitution or federal laws is ground enough for being more significant than the other. The safeguarding of justice and the rule of law holds exceptional leverage in the very balance of our government.
Congressional oversight has come to recede in authority due to the vast expansion of the executive branch's power. Congress was vested this power when George Mason of Virginia deemed that Congress not only had legislative powers, but they also had inquisitorial powers. Modern day oversight has become a shame of the works that were once accomplished by the House in the investigation of Robert Morris and General Arthur St. Clair. These investigative committees were able to gather information at their own will. In the recent investigation of Donald Trump's meddling with Ukraine's leader, a blurry picture has been painted since the committee cannot acquire enough information. The legislative body of Congress is unable to gather the proper information of what is happening in the federal agencies and the White House because of the insufficient staff resources. Questioning the reliability of the source. Partisanship has been for political parties to assume their agenda by overstepping oversight of a situation and responding in a fashion that favors their party. Many times this partisanship is seen in a very gapped House or Senate. This includes the $2.3 trillion budget requested to Congress by President Biden and the lack of investigative power granted to congressional workers when a process such as reconciliation comes into play. Congressional oversight has little effect over the executive branch and puts an awful lot of tension between a future of massive rule or one of bipartisanship. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm interested in examples where there may not be a clear path to legislation, if any, but an investigation is conducted. Now, Watergate was investigating corruption in government, and I'm interested in whether you think it led to any legislation to deal with the excesses of Watergate, or whether you think there was some other benefit to holding those hearings. In the same way, what about the tobacco company hearings where they looked at what they knew about the danger of cigarettes, the baseball hearings into the use of steroids? Do we have to have a clear path to legislation, and is there any other reason to hold a hearing?
I actually really like your question because many times Congress has used their inquisitorial powers and powers to investigate simply to uncover mysteries, just like in Watergate and as well in the Teapot Dome scandal. But oftentimes legislation, or as our founders intended it, the framers intended for the inquisitorial power to be used in order for our legislators to get a better grasp of situations, and then in turn for that to affect their policy. But oftentimes that doesn't happen. So oftentimes it doesn't happen, but that the original intention of the investigatory power was so that it can get legislators a better grasp of situations in order to then in turn affect their policy making.
In relation to Watergate in particular, with regards to United States versus Nixon, the Supreme Court, the court made it clear that the president wasn't, well, he inherently was being looked at through a criminal lens, and that the Watergate scandal was a criminal issue at hand, and that's why his executive privilege couldn't be claimed within the congressional hearings due to the fact that the president is not above the rule of law. So in the mere fact of this instance with Nixon, there was a law already in place, and Congress's job as the inquisitorial power was to seek information that it might not be able to get with regards to that executive privilege Nixon had claimed.
So,
Thank you.
can you, is there a unifying principle? I mean, some standards, you know, as to sort of what the proper ambit of congressional action in this area is. I mean, the idea, you know, could it reasonably lead to legislation is sort of no standard at all, because it's very, very easy to just justify virtually anything under that standard. If you guys were writing, whether constitutionally or by statute, a set of guidelines or restrictions, what principles would you include?
So I just want to confirm guidelines within how Congress investigates or how they.
Yeah,
Can you elaborate on that?
what's a proper subject for investigation so as to try to eliminate the most egregious examples that are just patently grandstanding?
Well, I think something that is quite important to note with regards to making some sort of, like you say, outlines or some sort of delineation of when Congress cannot use their powers to investigate or their inquisitorial powers as well as their powers of oversight. Within the Constitution, there's no illicit, like I mentioned in my testimony, there's no mention of Congress's power of oversight. There's no mention of their power to investigate or conduct investigations like that. The only thing that is mentioned is that all legislative powers herein are granted to the Congress of the United States, right? So that area is quite blurred, and there is no exact delineation of when they cannot use their powers. However, throughout the test of time and since our first Congress, they have proven valuable, and Congress has effectively used their powers, in my opinion.
So I just want to add to that Congress, due to itself being its own self-regulating body with regards to its investigation, the House and Senate both have their own rules that they set forth through their rules and committee.
Are they adequate?
No. From what we've seen, it's really the investigations are really a partisan act in my view. A lot of the times, so I think that there may need to be more room for maybe the minority party within the committee to be able to have maybe. I mean, right now, from what I see, it's equal with terms of how many time, like the minutes to ask questions and how many witnesses they can call. But yeah, I mean, I would like to see more of the minority being involved with that.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Please, Mark, go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to agree with my colleague, but as well respectively disagree. I believe the way that Congress has used their investigatory power and oversight over time has proven extremely beneficial, and I think it's worked. More specifically, with reference to the Teapot Dome scandal, when Senator Fall was convicted of criminal conspiracy and bribery, that was the first time in U.S. history that a presidential cabinet member had actually been sent to prison through Congress's power of investigatory and the power of oversight. So in more recent years, we've seen more partisan usage of these powers, as my colleague mentioned. But over time and overall, I do think that the ability of Congress's ability to use their oversight and investigatory powers has been adequate.
Thank you. In recent years, a lot of the investigations we've seen have been very public, centering around public hearings where they subpoena people, call them in to speak in front of Congress. But there are other ways in which Congress can use their investigatory powers, right? They can hire staff, they can ask expert witnesses, they can do investigations and file or publicize reports afterwards that aren't this almost like a trial. It looks almost like a trial, right? These public hearings. Do you think that these public hearings are the most effective way to handle these investigations? And if so or not, why do you think that they are so popular recently?
I think that making them public is beneficial to the community at large. And I'd like to note that you mentioned, for the most part, how they sometimes seem like a trial or more like a cross-examination at times. But actually, a couple weeks ago, I was watching Congress investigate Seth Rogen, in which he was testifying for Alzheimer's awareness, and most of the time, Congress is using that power to basically gauge the community, gauge the citizens, as we are a representative democracy, and then in turn use those testifying and use those congressional hearings to then affect their legislation.
That's time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to thank you for your initial presentation. I think that you sought out to specifically address the question that was asked, and that's always nice to see, because that really is the point of the initial investigation. You were each articulate and talked about, made assertive statements that I thought were provocative. You described one role of the hearings is to seek information so that they can draft effective legislation. You also talked about how you think their power has receded as against the executive, which has increased. Spoke about the staff resources and that sort of thing. So I thought that was quite an effective initial presentation. And then regarding the questions, it's a difficult area, and which you addressed, the difficulty of it, of what if you don't come up with legislation, and as Annie pointed out, you can always justify, well, we're looking to see if there's legislation to be had here. So you talked about the use of some of the hearings, such as Watergate, and that and your characterization. I thought it was fine that you disagreed slightly with each other, and to give more of an overview of it. So all in all, a fine presentation, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anthony, you want to go ahead?
Sure. Yeah, I want to commend you guys on both the knowledge and information you had, and the way that you applied it, but most importantly, on the way that you engaged actively with us. I really appreciated, on the first question, I think, Mark, you said, I really like your question because there really is a problem with this. And it showed that you not only were listening, but you really cared about this, and you identified there's a problem, and you were excited to get the opportunity to talk about it. And then, Carlos asking Andrew for clarification of what he was actually looking for. We've actually previously had a couple of teams who didn't really get what we were asking, and it sent them in a really wrong direction. And I really appreciate that you, when you weren't sure, asked for clarification, because we don't want you to just spout off information that you have in your head that you've prepared and studied. We want you to thoughtfully, critically have a conversation with us and respond to the questions that we are asking. And I think you guys did a really effective job of doing that. You used great examples. You made poignant arguments, and I was really, really impressed with all of that. I wish we would have had a little bit more time to go into my final question than we did, because I think there was some really interesting stuff to go to there, but that's okay. That's not your fault. My one piece of constructive criticism for you guys would be that often your responses were a bit lengthy and wordy. We kind of understood what you were saying. You made the point you were trying to make, and you repeated yourself a little bit, or you kind of kept going down the same vein. And you only have 8 minutes of follow-up questions. So we want to get as much information out of you as possible. And the information you gave was awesome. But the one thing that would really make you guys a just absolutely stellar team, not that you aren't already really excellent and wonderful, would be just a little bit more of like a rapid fire pace. You don't want to go too fast where we can't parse what you're saying, but it just felt like it was difficult for us to get as much content in as we would have liked to, because the content that we got from you was really excellent.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so I agree with that. I really did. It's interesting that Anthony began with sort of your manner and the like, because I found it very effective. And Carlos, I also noticed when you began with, I really like your question because it reminded me of actually good appellate advocacy, sort of in court, or just any sort of a hearing, where you're striking sort of a quasi conversational tone, but using it as a segue to sort of get to what it is you want to talk about. And it sort of validates the questioner, and it's just a very nice pleasant, and to me, always effective manner. And I thought your whole team sort of was able to strike a tone that was very effective. I thought the substance was really good as well. I might have liked a little more specificity sometimes, but on the other hand, you've got 12 minutes, to tell us everything you know about, these constitutional questions. So it's a little unrealistic, and it put you in a difficult position. And I think for that reason, to the extent your team seemed so knowledgeable and so thoughtful, and I really emphasis on thoughtful, that I would have liked the opportunity to be able to discuss sort of more topics with you or more questions with you. And so in a way, you shortchange yourself by sort of eliminating your opportunity to demonstrate, the breadth as well as the depth of your knowledge.
Thank you.
That's
Right,
it.
Carlos.
That's a quibble. I thought I thought your team was really, really, really good.